to the Law Schoolers. Thus far, we have talked about pretty much everything that you need to know for establishing a secure transaction. We talked about attachment, we talked about perfection, and then we talked about priority. Now, the final part of secure transactions that we really need to focus on is enforcement. How do you enforce a secure transaction, this agreement that you have? Because the whole purpose of taking a security interest in some collateral is to receive payment and for the loan that you lent out, and enforcing is a way to receive that payment if there is a default. So the whole purpose of enforcement is to enforce the security interest, and it comes as a result of this default. So that's what we are going to be focusing on in this episode specifically. What is default? How does it work? And what are some of the rights that the secured party has, the debtor has, and yeah, we'll just get into it from there. So let's talk about default and default clauses. There is no actual definition for default as far as what default is. No legal definition. It is a contractual definition. Each contract is going to define what ultimately is considered a default. Default clauses are going to outline what types of activities is going to be a default. And usually these activities is going to consist of either it's not only a missed payment. A missed payment is often going to be considered a default, but there are other things that could be considered a default, and these include events where the debtor may increase the risk of making their payments on time, or the value of the collateral depreciates significantly in a short period of time. Additionally, creditors can say that a default occurs if it deems itself insecure. So ultimately, a default is very, very fluid in how a debtor feels. In how a creditor feels, and whether or not it feels secure in their ability to receive payment for the loan that they had lent out. Enforcement of a claim of default, though, based on insecurity, must be made in good faith. So there is that one limitation there. Even though it deems itself insecure, it needs to deem itself insecure in good faith. So what happens if, by contractual terms, a default occurs? The first thing that is going to happen is what is known as acceleration. Acceleration clauses simply state that once the debtor is in default, the entire debt is due, not just the missed payment. So if you miss a payment and the debtor says, okay, you missed your payment, you're in default, the whole debt is due at that time. That is the whole point of an acceleration clause. Generally, if the debtor goes into default and the loan accelerates, there is no way to de-accelerate the debt. You can't go backwards. You can't make up that missed payment and say, okay, we're good now. It doesn't quite work that way. With the permission of the creditor, though, missed payments can be made up. So in that sense, it may be de-accelerated, but it needs to be with permission of the creditor, the one who claimed that the debtor is in default. Without this permission, the only way to cure the debt, meaning make yourself clean of the debt, is to pay it in full, the entire balance that is due at the time of acceleration. Okay, so what are some of the rights of the parties that you have when there is a default? We're going to talk about the rights of secured parties and rights of debtors. Pretty straightforward. Secured party, their right is the ability to recover the collateral. That's the whole point of the security agreement, so their right is to get paid. And if they're not getting paid with cash, the collateral is going to be used to make up that payment. Article 9, 601, subsection A, says that the secured party has the right to a judicial lien, to foreclose, and these are all going to be methods of enforcement that the secured party has the right to do. As for the debtor, Article 9, Section 9, 623 allows the debtor to redeem the collateral by paying in full after the default. So, after acceleration, to cure is also to redeem, which is to pay the debt in full. You have the ability to do that. You are given first dibs to make yourself clear of that debt before any foreclosure or any other actions occur against you. Then further in Article 9, Section 601, subsection D, any other rights that the debtor has could be made by an agreement between the creditor and the creditor and the debtor, whether that's after the default had occurred. Probably not after the default had occurred. It's probably going to be in the security agreement that they originally agreed to and what kind of rights they have there. So, rights to secure party, your ability to recover the collateral and the methods for recovery, and then the right of the debtor, the ability to redeem, and then any other rights that are agreed upon between the parties. But that's our beginning discussion on enforcement. Again, enforcement is just you have a security interest. You are going to enforce that security interest by protecting your assets that you had agreed to lend out, and you can do that by recovering collateral. And default is going to be this trigger that allows the secured party to begin enforcement. We talked about default clauses, acceleration, and then the rights of the parties. That's all for this episode. I'll talk to you guys all later. Have a good one. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Law Schoolers Podcast. If you enjoyed the show or the material shared on the Law Schoolers website, you can support Law Schoolers by becoming a patron at patreon.com/lawschoolers. I also wanted to provide a quick disclaimer. Nearly all Law Schoolers material is unedited due to the sake of time and a desire to keep the content as raw as possible. Additionally, the material is only provided for educational purposes and is not to be used as legal advice. If the material is used as legal advice, Law Schoolers is not liable for any legal outcomes. Thank you again for enjoying the show.